rise in the Persian Gulf. That's after the United States resumed its attacks on Iran. In this latest attack, the U.S. struck missile launch sites and what they said were Iranian boats laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. described these as attacks as self-defense. Iran has retaliated. It's brought down a U.S. drone. But what can you tell us about this latest outbreak of violence in the area?
The attack by the Trump regime was unprovoked. The 4 sailors that were murdered were in Iranian territorial waters. That is not a place where anyone would wish to lay mines. So it's unclear why Trump and his armed forces carried out this attack. It's a clear provocation. Of course, the Iranians retaliated, and they also struck a ship off of the coast of Oman and brought down at least 1 drone, some say 3 drones. But this comes at a time when Netanyahu is also expanding his genocidal war in Lebanon, and that is being done to undermine the agreement. So whether this attack in the Persian Gulf region was also a move to undermine the potential agreement or not, that's still unclear. But the Iranians will not sign an agreement if the genocide in southern Lebanon continues, or if the United States continues to attack Iranian armed forces. If that's the case, then the strait will remain as it is now, and the global economic crisis will continue to grow.
Right. This is yet another time when the United States has attacked Iran right in the midst of negotiations. This has happened before. What does this tell you about the U.S. commitment to resolving this conflict? And does it place a huge question mark now over the talks that are taking place to try and get to a peace agreement?
No, without a doubt. And the Iranians have already warned the Americans about this, that they will end the negotiating process. And Iran is in no rush to end this standoff. The Americans, before the 12-day war last year, they were negotiating with Iran, and it later turned out that that was all a facade and that the Americans were secretly conspiring with Netanyahu to launch a war. And this war, too, was carried out and begun as the Iranians were negotiating with the United States. So the Iranians are under no illusion that the United States is a deceitful regime and that it cannot be trusted. And that's why Iran's armed forces are fully prepared for a restart of the war. And if that happens, of course, I think we will have a global economic depression that will become inevitable. But as things stand, if the United States yanks hard on Netanyahu's leash and ends the genocidal strikes in Lebanon, and stops its unprovoked attacks against Iran, then the global economic crisis can gradually be eased. But it's up to Trump and Netanyahu.
Right, and looking at these attacks in southern Iran, there's ostensibly a ceasefire in place. President Trump says that when these attacks are conducted by the United States, he does not consider it a violation of that ceasefire. I mean, does Iran buy that?
No, of course not. But this is the nature of the U.S. empire. It's the nature of the Zionist regime as well. The Zionist regime is slaughtering Palestinians in Gaza every day. Sniping little girls, bombing little boys, and in Lebanon they're bombing apartment blocks, crushing entire families, and it's all done as there are ceasefires both in Gaza and Lebanon, and it's being supported by the United States. So we have no expectations that the United States or its allies will behave in a sane and normal manner, and that is why Iran has said that it is prepared to re-engage in war, and it is also prepared to continue the stalemate in the Strait of Hormuz. What the United States is doing, though, through pursuing these policies, is that it's delaying an agreement which would allow ships to pass through the Strait of Hormuz and ease the crisis that is emerging across the globe, including in the United States. And at some point, this is going to begin to look very bad for Trump.
Well, let's look at those diplomatic efforts that are underway to try and reach an agreement. An Iranian delegation, which included the foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, as well as the speaker of the Iranian parliament, were in Qatar for those talks. We understand that the speaker has since returned to Tehran. The fact that the Iranian delegation were in Qatar at that level, at such a senior level, is that an indication that the two sides are pretty close to an agreement on what's being called a memorandum of understanding?
Not necessarily, because of what the Netanyahu is now doing in Lebanon. He's expanding the genocidal assaults. And this is a repeat of what we saw after the 39-day war. Back then, we had a ceasefire, and ships were supposed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and there was supposed to be a regional ceasefire. And then Netanyahu began carpet bombing Lebanon to wreck that ceasefire. And the ships then, the Iranians said that we will not allow the ships from those 5 countries that participated in the war against Iran to pass through the strait, meaning Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. So because of Netanyahu, the global economic crisis continues today. And now that the United States is finally coming to its senses and is seeking an agreement, Netanyahu again is expanding his genocidal war to prevent the global economic crisis from easing. So it is unclear what will happen. The Speaker of Parliament went to Qatar to make sure that if there is an agreement, the Iranian assets that have been stolen by the Americans, that they are swiftly returned to Iran, because we don't trust the United States. So apparently the meetings in Qatar went well, but also it was the beginning of an initiative to encourage Arab regimes in the Persian Gulf to tilt away from Trump and to behave more reasonably, and to end their assistance in attacking Iran. If the relationship, the Iranians want to bring about a change in the relationship between countries in the Persian Gulf, but of course, these countries will have to stop assisting the United States in attacking it.
We don't have the details on what is taking place in these discussions between the Iranians and the United States, but there's speculation that Iran will lift its restrictions on maritime shipping in the Straits of Hormuz under the terms of this MOU, this Memorandum of Understanding that's being discussed right now. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, the United States is supposed to, at the very beginning, release half of Iranian assets that were stolen, and the other half would gradually be released. It will also waive sanctions on Iran's energy sector and end the siege on the Strait of Hormuz. It will also impose a ceasefire across the region, and which is something that Netanyahu is trying to undermine as we speak. And of course, Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz will remain in place. In return, what Iran does is that it announces that it will not pursue a nuclear weapon, which Iran has been saying for decades, so that's nothing important for Iran. And Iran will also allow ships from countries that have been, the 5 countries that have supported the United States in its war against Iran, to pass through the Strait of Hormuz and to normalize the passage through the Strait of Hormuz, which is something that Iran wants to, because we want to have business as usual. So it is potentially a very good deal for Iran, and it shows that the United States has failed in the war. But the Zionist lobby in the United States is pushing very hard to undermine the deal, and Netanyahu too, by expanding his genocidal attacks, is also trying to prevent the deal from happening. So the fate of the global economy rests in the hands of Trump and Netanyahu.
There is something else that President Trump repeats. He says he wants the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened, and once it's reopened, he will not have Iran charge any kind of toll or fee for shipping going through that. He says there's no legal precedent for that. We've heard from others in the United States who also point to the fact that it is an international waterway. What is Iran's position on that?
It is not an international waterway. It is not wide enough to be an international waterway. It is Iranian and Omani territory. And Iran will definitely take fees from ships that pass through. And if Trump is upset about that, he shouldn't have started the war. He basically, he and Netanyahu force Iran to change their stance on the Strait of Hormuz. Iran will receive fees, and they will also prevent U.S. naval ships, Israeli assets, and Israeli ships from passing through the Strait of Hormuz as well. So this change is irreversible.
Dr. Mohammad Marandi, as always, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.